generic advice doesn't work. Personalized advice works. People are infinitely interested in what works for them, not what works for everyone else.
To me, the holy grail is applying the technology of AI and big data analytics to all the new framework we have for medicine, which is, let's call it functional medicine or systems thinking or whatever you want to call it, network medicine, which understands the body as this network as opposed to diseases. And that combined with the omics revolution, all the data from omics and all the data from quantified self provides an enormous potential to revolutionize how we diagnose and treat disease and a potential for providers as well as patients or people to have support for decisions of what they do for their health. Mm-hmm. And we're not there yet, but to me, there is no way, given the complexity of human biology, that we can continue to actually sort of do the medicine the way we've been doing it. And I think the work that you're doing, AI and the technology and the understanding of the complexity of human biology really helps us to sort of reframe how we're going to do things. You know, talking to my daughter who's about to start medical school in a month, and she's going into what I would say is a sort of dark ages view of biology. And it's frightening to me because I know she's going to get indoctrinated in a paradigm that is really outdated. And it's not that it's irrelevant; it's relevant, but it's just the surface of what's happening. And so, I'd love to hear from you how, with January AI and AI in general in medicine, you see the change happening where all this data gets put into a machine learning system and AI system, and how that will change medical care, how it will change what people do, how it will change what doctors do. Because as an individual doctor, I'm lucky. I basically had the privilege of seeing tens of thousands of patients, literally doing millions and millions of data points. So I have like a pattern recognition machine in my head, but it's certainly not good as a machine learning. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you after doing this for so many decades that in my patients, I see patterns over and over that no one's described. I'll give you an example. So let's say someone's got high levels of mercury. Well, often they have oxidative stress. They have low amino acids. They have problems with methylation and B vitamins. They may have low zinc and minerals, and they have low glutathione because their body trying to detoxify. And I see this whole pattern, and I'm like, I know what's going on. But that's not in a textbook. It's just something that I noticed. And what's true about what you're doing is that there are millions of these kinds of examples of undiscovered archaeological excavation of human biology in ways we've never done before that is only now beginning to be possible.
So basically what AI has done, I think most people, your listeners are familiar with what AI has done for, say, driving. A lot of people have some self-driving features in their cars. Some folks do that warn you when a car is getting close to you, for example. Or if you're getting out of your lane or you're getting too close to the car in front of you. We know that AI is working in fraud protection. It's, Google's correcting your spelling, right? People they're using that all the time. You mentioned radiology, right? I think AI can democratize medicine. Today, the difference between an expert, absolute first-rate radiologist with someone with not great expertise, not many years of expertise, is, essentially there is a difference right now. There is a difference in the care that people get right now. But I think with AI, we can democratize it. How? Well, AI is fantastic for pattern recognition, right? So it can bring kind of the genius of the finest doctor to all, much like, we were able to bring the best classroom professors to the world by democratizing education. I think AI can democratize medicine by sort of so to give you an example, there are 122 million people are believed to have prediabetes or diabetes in America. There are 7,000 endocrinologists in this whole country. So if medical doctors, good luck with that. So if people are not taught to look at novel markers like CGM data and heart rate data, if doctors are not taught nutrition in school, you tell me how well equipped are they for observing metabolic dysfunction early and for detecting it and pointing it out to people. So I think what does AI do for us? Well, AI can interpolate huge amounts of data that is not human interpretable it's just not human interpretable. So let's use the simple example of CGM. If you're wearing a CGM, maybe you remember the food you ate yesterday or the day before, or maybe you use a product that tells you what you were eating last Tuesday. Okay, but can you keep in mind what your heart rate was then? Do you remember how many hours you were fasting then? Do you remember what you were eating that gave you the spike? Now, some people can give you a picture of what you were eating. January gives you the fiber, the amount of fiber you had in your stomach. It tells you the macros of your food, that sort of thing. So the data, this collection of data we're talking about that's growing, which is classic markers from doctors, new consumer health data, synthesis of this massive amount of data cannot be done without AI. It just can't. It's not human interpretable. It just isn't. So AI can give us that. The other thing AI can do is can predict for us. Once it learns patterns, it can predict. Mark works out every Tuesday and Thursday. And when he does, he has his protein shake that he always has. Let me suggest a better time for the protein shake. Or I can see that when he runs before the protein shake, he has a better response than when he runs after the protein shake for Mark. Or I noticed that the time window between his last meal and his sleep is too close. It's like 1 hour. I'm going to, over time, this is what January does today. So we use these interventions to give you examples. One intervention we use is fasting. We help people understand their eating period and their fasting period. And you know, the ultimate test of metabolic fitness is how well you go from fast to fed and all of that. But that will be in the future. But at this moment, we can tell you what's your fasting period, what's your eating period. Sometimes people come into our program and they've been eating 16 hours a day, fasting 8 hours. Over time, we slowly change this 15 minutes at a time. We get them to fast, say 12 hours, eat 12 hours. And over time, we encourage them, like myself. Now I eat over 8 hour period. I fast for 16 hours, no problem at all. I've done it over a long period of time. So that's one lever. The second lever, as you know, glycemic response is highly impacted by the amount of fiber in your body. How much fiber you have in your body from last 24 hours impacts how you might spike on the next thing that you eat. January measures the amount of fiber that's in your body that you've had in your diet. So that's another one. Another one is to just understand glycemic load, glycemic index of what you're eating, offering you alternatives to those foods that taste the same but have lower GI/GL. The other one is to essentially help you figure out how much to work out, when to work out, to keep your blood sugar in a healthy range. It also helps you manage your calories because, as you know, intermittent fasting in combination with calorie management has shown to improve insulin sensitivity. And the two are very powerful together. Dari always reminds me, not intermittent fasting alone, not calorie management alone, together, they are very powerful. So these are things that we can do with AI that we could not do before. Your doctor can't follow you around. They're not in your body. They're not a sensor. No coach or no one can see inside your body, but a combination of wearables. By the way, wearables are going to be so exciting. You have seen very little so far. Wait till we get to continuous lactate sensors.
Tell us about the future because you know, with the wearables, they're interesting and they're novelty for a little while. People get tired of them. You know, I've had different wearables over the time, and it's like interesting and entertaining. But then I kind of get bored of it. You know, how do you address that?
Yeah. So what are they telling us today? Sensors are telling us a lot today. They're telling us, as you know, about VO2 max, which some people say is the ultimate measure of longevity. They're telling us about gait. They're telling us about blood pressure, caloric burn. They're telling us about quality of sleep, the amount of sleep, our resting heart rate, our heart rate variability. They're telling us a lot today. But what's coming? First of all, as I said, that's not enough because we need to understand food to make sense out of all of these things. But what's coming down the road? Well, continuous ketone monitors, they're going to be fantastic. You've seen the announcement from Abbott where potentially the same sensor that tells you your blood glucose can also tell you your ketone level, which is great because it will today, you know, we have invasive ketone monitors today in the hospital, end of life in the ER. We are using very invasive, but actually that's for lactate. But for ketone, it will warn of impending ketoacidosis. For type 1s, this is really, really important. If their blood sugar is going too high and they kind of need insulin, that would be really useful. Also, people that are on super low calorie, low carb diets can see how their metabolism is faring once they have continuous ketone monitoring.
Yeah.
And another thing that's coming in is the continuous lactate monitors. This will essentially this is what's used, like I was saying earlier, in hospitals end of life. They use invasive lactate monitors to see, for example, severity of sepsis, like how bad it is when someone is like close to death. But also athletes, we will love to have continuous lactate monitors, right, for athletic performance. Another thing, of course, and the ultimate is the continuous cortisol monitors. Once we get cortisol monitors, we will understand chronic stress, which impacts, of course, immune and inflammatory systems, which, as you know, increases susceptibility to diseases like autoimmune disease, cardiometabolic disease, mental diseases, and cancer. So really, really looking forward to ketone and lactate and cortisol monitors coming down the road. This will also be transformative.
Is there any insulin monitors coming?
We need continuous insulin monitors. The fact that we look at glucose and we don't look at insulin is insane.
Yeah, that's right.
It's insane.
It's true. I mean, glucose is the big thing, but it's maybe hard to measure insulin, but it's such a more relevant marker.
It is so relevant. It is utterly relevant. And so there are some technologies way more relevant. I think there are some technologies that I know of in some labs that may be approaching that, but nothing that is going to be commercially available as far as I know today.
Tell us why insulin is more important than sugar.
Insulin. So there are two sides of a coin. So insulin is a hormone that lets your cells take up glucose. People with type 1 diabetes are born without the ability to even produce insulin. So they are lacking insulin. Some people, like my co-founder, Mike Snyder, produce insulin, but produce it slowly. So he's a type 2. So he's a person with type 2 diabetes. So if you don't produce enough insulin or insulin is lacking, you have all this extra glucose sitting up in your bloodstream that then can damage your body in a number of ways. Excess glucose can create microvascular complications, as you know. You can essentially develop retinopathy, neuropathy. You can have diabetic nephropathy, so you can have liver disease. Essentially, so let's go through it one by one.
Basically, the insulin is the first thing that goes wrong.
Insulin is the first thing. Yeah.
And actually, if your sugar can be perfectly normal and your insulin can be all over the place to try to regulate your sugar, and it's the first clue that something's wrong.
Absolutely.
It's one of those things that's stunning to me that one, doctors don't measure because it's cheap and easy to do.
Absolutely.
And two, that we haven't developed a continuous monitor for that. Because that to me is a game changer. Because when people see that number, that's going to be more predictive than even their blood sugar and what's going on with their metabolic health.
100%. Yes. If you need to understand your pancreas function, we don't know how much someone's pancreas capacity is right now. We don't. That would be hugely useful, because like diabetic retinopathy is the most common cause of blindness right now for working adults in the developed world. As you know, in diabetic neuropathy, basically high blood sugar can injure nerves throughout the body and damage nerves in legs and feet, which can lead to foot ulcers and amputation. You know that. And then, of course, the kidney disease coming from diabetes is the number one cause of kidney failure. Almost a third of people with diabetes develop nephropathy. So, yeah, these are pretty serious. And you would think that if we're solving for continuous glucose, we would solve for continuous insulin to understand the whole picture. And for some reason, we are not.
Can you distinguish between artificial intelligence and machine learning for people? Because I'm not sure everybody understands that.
Well, just machine learning is the act of developing models and training models with the data that you get. And that's really what we were trying to do, is essentially create a model that could you could create a model that could guesstimate the nutritional values of foods, for example. That's a model. You get to artificial intelligence when things start, working on their own to some degree, and you kind of create this loop where the machine is learning by itself. The model, you kind of have the model, and it is collecting data, brings it back, goes back into the model, retrains and relearns, and uses it. So they're used interchangeably. But for example, machine learning and data science, you hear a lot about data science. Those are completely different. Data science is basically looking at data and looking for patterns, where machine learning is actually model development. You actually develop a model and you continue to refine your model for accuracy, for
It's learning. It's literally learning from the data.
Learning. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right. So the problems we set out to solve were, first, food labeling. So we aggregated the most gigantic 16 million foods, the most biggest database of curated databases. So this mega database of databases of recipes and menu items from local restaurants, not chain restaurants, local restaurants, your mom and pop shops, and grocery items, everything that was possible to get in America, we aggregated into one database.
Really? That's incredible.
It is incredible. It's a lot of work. It's expensive. And then we used machine learning to guesstimate its nutritional values, anything that didn't have nutritional values. And that is a very complicated process we went through. We have a lot of intellectual property filed around our abilities, pending patents around how we did this. Then we realized that glycemic response was better associated with glycemic index and glycemic load than with just carbs. Because you don't just eat pure carbs, right? You eat carbs with other stuff, with fiber, there's water in the food. So we felt that it was really important that we understand GI/GL of food. So our next machine learning project was to estimate glycemic index and glycemic loads for these 16 million foods.
Which is very interesting, because when you start to understand about personalized medicine and nutrition, you realize that even the same food in different people can have profoundly different effects because of their microbiome, their immune system, food sensitivities, their genetics. There's so many factors. So glycemic load isn't glycemic load. It's like it really depends on the person.
Which is why we ran a trial. So we ran an observational trial, put it out there. 23,000 people applied to it. Took 1,022 people, including healthy individuals, people with prediabetes, and people with type 2 diabetes. 250 of them were those. And associated people's glycemic response to the GI/GL of the foods they were eating. Yeah. We turned that into a prediction model. And that prediction model is what we presented at the American Diabetes Association in June of 2020 as a poster. This was Mike Snyder and our scientists together presenting that poster. That poster really described how we had done our work in silico, using AI first, kind of using machine learning, and then had put it into humans to vet it, and then how our models were accurate for 33 hours into the future, with a high level of accuracy. So what are the uses of these models? What does it do? What's it good for? Well, when you can predict someone's glycemic response, you can let them compare foods, like any two grocery items, any two restaurant menus. They can compare any two recipes. Say you want to make pancakes for your kids this weekend, but you don't want it to be very high glycemic index. You want it to be something lower. You can compare recipes. You can decide, which one you want to make. Maybe you want to know essentially the price of what you're eating in minutes of walking. Like, hey, if you eat this fried chicken, you're gonna have to walk 36 minutes. Do you have 36 minutes to walk to put your blood sugar back in a healthy blood glucose range? You don't have 36 minutes. Maybe save this for the weekend. How about, so it essentially tells people that truly closes the human behavior loop, because then what this is going to do. And then it also allows us
although you have to track it, because so part of what you do is you help people track their blood sugar.
Yes.
And so that gives them real-time feedback. So while you may have determined through your machine learning model that this or that food has this or that glycemic index or load, when they eat it, it might be different for them. right? So then they
Actually,
get to
the
track.
prediction is for them. The prediction is for them. So in
Based
fact,
on what though? Based on their, because it's not based
there's
on the food. It's not based on
it's
the
based
actual
on the
food.
food. It's based on the actual food. But after 4 days of training, that's what the poster presented. After 4 days of training with January, using food data, glucose data, and heart rate data, January can predict your glycemic response to any food in the 16 million strong
Wow, that's
atlas.
unbelievable.
So you don't have to put foods through your body. You can
Wow,
put them through the
that's
AI.
amazing.
Let the
That's amazing.
machine,
That is
let the
amazing.
machine tell you how you're going to respond.
That's
I mean,
amazing. So
this has
so if you ate a plum, it might be fine. If I ate a plum, it might not be fine, right?
exactly. But your
Yeah.
prediction and my prediction are going to be different. They're not going to be the same.
Although it's complicated because this gets even to a meta level of complexity with what the power of AI may be able to do. When you think about the 16 million foods, they're not all the same. So a carrot grown on a regenerative farm is different than a carrot grown in a commercial farm. If you have, I mean, there was just a study published today in Nature looked at the metabolomic analysis, like literally the metabolic features
Absolutely.
on the molecules in grass-fed meat versus plant-based meat. And even though the nutrition facts label was identical, they were profoundly different in so many
One
of their
hundo.
qualities.
Absolutely.
And I think it's something people really have trouble with because, if you say, well, yes, meat, you're going to do meat. But what if you do grass-fed meat or kangaroo meat, for example, we talked on the podcast, lowers inflammation, or wild meat, whereas feedlot meat increases inflammation. Same amount of volume of protein or grams of protein, but profoundly different biological effects. How do you account for all of that? That seems like
That's our
a
dream.
nightmare.
That's our dream.
That's a nightmare.
It's our dream to be able to. I mean, what you just said is what Christopher Gardner told us 4 years ago. He said, "Look, tomatoes grown in Sonoma are going to be different than tomatoes grown in Chile, but we are heading to that level of precision. We will be able to tell you your carbon footprint eventually of where your foods came from and what kind of nutrients were in the soil where they were grown, the method of cooking, and everything else you just said. I mean, precision. We mean precision, right? So some of that can come
That's
from
incredible.
companies like us." But some of it has to come from government and government policy, which is why I support Tufts School of Nutrition, because it has such a strong policy program. Government policy, don't underestimate the power. Government can outspend private sector, as you know, tremendously. It can outspend philanthropy. Government policy is critically important. They're part of the solution, and we need to bring them to the table. But you're right. That's the precision we're headed for. And January has just started this. But we dream of greater precision.
So what you're describing, Noosheen, is a radical transformation in our thinking about medicine, which has pretty much been one size fits all. You have diabetes, you get the diabetes drugs. You have rheumatoid arthritis, you get the rheumatoid arthritis drugs. And it's so uniform, and there's really very little accounting for the massive complexity of human biology. And not only the complexity of human biology, but the inter-individual differences in our biology. So no two people are the same. So you're talking about personalized medicine, personalized nutrition, precision health, precision medicine. All these terms are floating around, and they're speaking to the fact that we've just really barely begun to scratch the surface of understanding how our bodies work. And also we're so focused on the end stage diseases that we haven't really taken a step back to go, what is happening in our biology like decades before our first symptom? We know, for example, on an MRI, through functional MRIs, we can see inflammation and changes in brains in Alzheimer's patients 20 or 30 years before they get a problem. Or we can start to look at patterns in your blood tests that as a child that predict your risk of getting diabetes in the future.
100%.
And we just, there's this patient I had years ago who came in to see me at Canyon Ranch where I worked, and their blood sugar was like 115, which is on the way to diabetes. It's like 126 is diabetes. And I said, gee, your sugar's pretty high. Have you seen your doctor about it? He said, oh, yeah. I said, what did your doctor say? Well, the doctor said, we're going to wait and watch it. And I said, watch for what? I said, wait until I get diabetes, and then they'll give me a drug.
Exactly.
And I'm like, whoa. So I think what you're talking about is a real revolution in our thinking about medicine. Particularly traditional healthcare is very dogmatic and very structured and rigid. And you're kind of coming out from left field with an idea that has the potential to transform how doctors address disease and how people themselves can be empowered to transform their health. So how did you start to go, oh, this is something I want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of how I got started is I decided in 2016 to start my own company after many years of like you said, running a family office, investing and serving on boards of companies and nonprofits. I had early success at Oracle, where I rose from the bottom of the organization in 1985 to vice president at age 27, taking the company from 25 million to 3 billion. So it was quite a ride. So I decided I was an operator, and I was going to go hands-on and bet on myself, as good old Larry Ellison has always taught all of us to do. And so I started a massive search.
Bet on yourself.
Bet on yourself. He always bets on himself. Absolutely.
That's a good one. That's a good one, yeah.
Yeah. So I started a massive search into like the theses that were getting a lot of attention, kind of big trends over the next decade, and most importantly, what I knew and loved. The classic kind of ikigai. So I happened to attend this White House Stanford University conference on societal benefit of AI and how to integrate the ever-evolving AI into the real world. There was a healthcare panel that was phenomenal. Fei Li, who had organized this conference with Russ Altman, suggested that those of us who were interested in health and machine learning go to this conference in LA in 2 weeks. So booked my flight that night with a friend who was doing research with me, went off to this conference. There we met Larry Smarr. I don't know if you know him or not, but he's one of the most self-quantified people on earth. And he was keynoting that conference. And he had diagnosed his own Crohn's disease way before symptoms had manifested. And kind of the common theme between all the presentations at the conference were that machine learning could essentially fill in the gaps for missing variables in research, and not just going forward, but going backwards. So you could go back and look at research that had been done before and fill in with machine learning for missing variables. And this really lit a light in my head, because I'd been talking to Andrew Lowe at MIT about how little research there was in medical research. And, ever since Nixon
how little research there was on AI, you mean?
No, how little research there was on human body. Like, we basically... 50 years ago, Nixon declared a war on cancer. And after 50 years, we have a few therapies, and now we think of cancer as a chronic condition. We have nothing for neurological diseases. We have nothing for aging. And it kind of became obvious that, A, we needed everyone to contribute data. Everyone needed to be part of research. Doing 25 people in this university and 85 people in that university and 1,000 people here and 2,000 people there wasn't going to solve for health in America. It wasn't going to. In fact, China is taking this with gumption. That's a whole other story if we want to get to it. But so the answer was to get everyone contributing to research. Like 40 million people have taken genetic tests now. We have that information. We can use that information. But secondly, it was to apply AI and machine learning to be able to see patterns and to be able to see how people are different. And I sort of became obsessed with this idea of this kind of, collecting multi-omic data. And I don't know if you remember human longevity at the time, a company called Arivel, these companies who were trying to collect data, but not a lot of that data was actionable. So full genome sequence, your full microbiome and all that wasn't immediately actionable.
No, you're right. I mean, I saw a lot of the patients who went through those programs, the Human Longevity Institute and Arivel, and there was a lot of actionable data. The problem is that the data was not in the realm of traditional medicine. And so a traditional doctor would look at it and go, I don't know what to do with this.
I don't know what to do with this.
And they'd send him to me as a functional medicine doctor who knows how to understand systems and networks and patterns in the data. And that was really insightful to me, because you can generate all this data, but it's not knowledge. It's just information. It's just a bunch of noise. But within the noise, there's patterns and there's data that actually help you decide what to do. And
100%.
I think that's the missing piece in medicine right now. And I think, just to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, you're talking about deviating from a medical system that has been focused on a reductionist approach to disease that eliminates all unnecessary variables. It basically ignores all the important data that's in the quote noise, which is actually signal.
Absolutely.
And this is the opportunity to understand the complexity of human biology in real time. And that's what functional medicine for me is. It's really a way of having a container for the complexity of human biology, understanding the body as this complex adaptive system, a network of networks. And when you just kind of think about this, I'm just going to talk about something that I think is going to be relevant for people to understand why what you're doing is so important and why it's it's so unique. And that is that, when you go to the doctor, you get a lab test and a checkup, and they'll do, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 different, analytes.
Mm-hmm.
That's nothing, right? You have literally hundreds of thousands of molecules in your body. You have billions and billions of chemical reactions happening every second.
Right.
And to think that we actually understand what's going on by just looking at a few numbers is just so silly. And yet it is what we do. And so what you're talking about with your company is to take massive amounts of data from massive amounts of people and try to look for the relevant data that teaches us stuff that we never even saw before.
Absolutely. So you're describing what we call in our company the multi-omic approach. So I was looking for exactly everything you just said, which was a more nuanced, more complex answer, as opposed to just reducing Mark to his, Dr. Hyman to his cholesterol and Noosheen to her A1C and the other person to their blood pressure. And that's how I found Mike Snyder, the ultimate multi-omic man. So
what is multi-omics? People don't know what that is.
Multi-omics is exactly what you were saying. It's multivariate decision making. So you take in the A1C as one data point. You take the cholesterol as a data point, but you also take wearables as a data point. You also take how much the person is sleeping as a data point. You also take how active they are as a data point, which, I mean, there's no classic medical biomarker for activity, so you take novel markers, you take classic markers, you take essentially all the data that you can get your hands on. I mean, you can go to, genomics, microbiome data, you can go to metabolomics. We are just beginning to understand proteomics. There are a few very promising companies too that just went public, Seer and Nautilus, who are going to be understanding the entire human proteome, which is new. It will be revolutionizing biology as genomics revolutionized health for us. So we understand so little so far. But anyway, the interesting thing is that Mike had diagnosed his own diabetes, and he has type 2 diabetes. And while Larry had used supercomputers to understand his own data, Mike has applied this to other people. So he had run this multi-omic study 4 years long at IPOP at Stanford University, where he had taken genomics and microbiome and people's wearables data and their food data and a number of other data, and to try to understand how people go from health to disease. So it was kind of love at first sight. We met and we decided to start this through. So I think that what you just said about systems biology, we call it multi-omics because I think it's a better representation of what we're trying to do. So Mike and I looked at what was possible, and we said, how can we bring this multivariate understanding of human health to everyone, to the masses, not just to the few people that can afford, Human Longevity Inc. or could have afforded some of these other solutions. So we said, what's the least expensive way that we could get started? And we said the basic was basically heart rate monitors who were readily available, like Apple Watch and Fitbit, and then continuous glucose monitors, which he had been using for 8 years before we even got started. And he was he felt like it was an inflection point in health. We were going from using wearables from fitness to actually for health. And so we started our work and we said, what can we learn from heart rate and CGM? And we quickly learned that...
Wait, CGM is continuous glucose
monitor.
Yeah.
So what we realized is that we actually had a missing piece of data. That missing piece of data was food. We needed to deeply understand food.
What? Food is relevant to health? What do you mean?
Yes. So,
really?
Yes. So we thought in order
what an epiphany, like Eureka, right? Thank
exactly.
God.
So we were obsessed. So I was kind of obsessed with prevention, use of AI to help us in this new field. And I thought, okay, continuous modalities of data like heart rate and glucose are going to be superbly interesting for doing machine learning, because continuous data, opportunity for machine learning, great, but food is missing. And so we started with trying to understand food. And of course, the issues that you have with food is that food data is, as you know, food data is, is imprecise. Even USDA data can be 20% wrong. Food labels are lacking. Only grocery items and chain restaurants have food labeling. So you have food journaling is really full of friction, hand entering stuff. There's no passive way, like just wearing something, it just automatically can track your food. Crowdsourced data, like data from MyFitnessPal, and those are faulty. They have low integrity, so it's hard to machine learn off of crowdsourced data because it's so imprecise. So and then there's a lot of generic advice there, just like, just don't eat refined sugar, no refined flour, lots of vegetables, walk 10,000 steps. Okay, that will take care of everything. Yeah. So we realize we need to bring precision to a very imprecise world. So that's how, with machine learning, we set out to tackle these gigantic problems.
So talk to me about how January AI, your company, is trying to enter this field of AI medicine, which is really not anywhere near clinical application in traditional healthcare right now, but it's happening on the margins, which is where you're working, and you're usually the changes come from the outside and they go into the inside. So I think I'd love to hear your vision of what you're doing with your company and how it can start to address some of these challenges we're seeing with healthcare.
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, let's make sure we're not a clinical solution. So we don't diagnose, we don't treat, we don't manage. We help people understand their bodies and become fiercely self-aware and be able to act on the data that they are provided with in conjunction with their clinical care. But let's talk about a few things. The current standard of care, as you said, is that doctors visiting patients 15 minutes a year, testing people when they complain about symptoms, not before then. Use classic markers to manage problems, which are very, very limited. They give them, like you said, reductive approach, give them one marker at a time. They don't think that Mark can handle a high cholesterol and a high A1C at the same time. So they give you one, like the biggest problem to deal with. And like, okay, let's just get them working on this. They suggest weight loss is kind of the end all to everything. It's like, what? If you just lose 25 pounds, all your markers are going to improve. And by the way, it's really easy. Just go home, no refined sugar, no refined flour, as I said, lots of vegetables, walk 10,000 steps.
Eat less and exercise more.
Yeah, that's all. Eat less and exercise more. It's all going to work out. The future is looking very, very different. We are looking at continuous health monitoring. And wearables play a role in that, but so does frequent testing. And some of the unconventional tests you mentioned, like functional MRIs, and you can see testing companies are just growing like crazy. So the amount of consumer health data outside of traditional clinical setting is growing tremendously, whether it's genomics, microbiome tests, whether it's food sensitivity tests from, let's say, Everlywell. Other companies, such as like IXLayer and other that are now food testing companies. So that's all growing. Wearables data, exploding. CGM data will explode, absolutely. About 12 CGMs out there today. There are going to be 47 new CGMs coming online in the next 3 to 5 years.
That's the continuous glucose monitors, right?
That's right. So you will have an explosion of wearables. Proteomics will be transformed completely, and we will understand the human proteome for the first time in the next several years. So we are going to
What is a proteome? Tell people what is a proteome? What is that?
Well, the proteome is basically our full protein profile of humans. And currently, we can understand a few proteins. We can essentially sort of understand a few proteins for tens of thousands of dollars. And I think in the future, we're going to be able to understand the whole proteome for not very many dollars. Kind of what happened to genomics. When we started looking at genomic sequencing, you remember it was $100,000 per person, and it went down to $1,000 per person. The whole genome sequencing went down quite a bit, and we have different levels of it, and that's been very, very informative for us. But anyway, so we're
the real issue is before you get going there, I want to just go a little bit more into the proteome. So for people listening, why do I care about my proteins, and who cares? Like, you have 20,000 genes, right? Mm-hmm. You probably have 5 to 7 million variations in those genes, and they're all producing proteins. That's their job. So your body, literally, your genes are expressing, when they're being expressed, are creating proteins, and those proteins are the messenger molecules in your body. And what you're saying is that we have very little insight into all these proteins and these protein networks and how they work and what they do and how they influence things. And in a very reductionist way, we might understand it, but we really don't understand the complexity of the interaction. And that's what you're talking about figuring out.
Yeah, we don't understand basically the function of in order for us to understand the function of the cells, we need to understand the proteome. We need to basically understand, it's going to inform disease identification. It's going to tell us so much about our bodies that we don't understand today, because frankly, it's too expensive, and we know so few. And there's quite a few companies that attempt this, but there are new methodologies coming in that are going to be transformative. So I'm really excited about those.
So beyond the glucose part, which I think everybody can understand, there's many companies doing the glucose monitoring. It seems to me what January AI is doing is a little bit different in that it's really trying to look at the sort of holistic view of human biology with CGM as a start, but not the whole story. And then
CGM, heart rate, and food to start, and then hopefully adding other omics over time. But yes, so definitely you're right. The future, I think people will go to see the doctors for acute diseases in the future. Probably most everyday things will be handled by AI at some point. But people will go when they have liver disease or something like that, when they have acute disease. And of course, we will have personalized health. And you mentioned kind of personalized medicine, personalized health, personalized nutrition. So maybe we can talk about that a little bit if you're up for it.
Yeah, so, what does that mean? For sure.
Yeah, exactly. So personalized medicine came about when people were looking at specific therapies for specific cancer. So they started sequencing, for example, the tumor to see what kind of chemotherapy would impact it the best, that could address it the best. So it was like matching medicine to disease, specifically chemotherapy or immunotherapy with a particular tumor. Precision health is upstream from that. It's way more preventative minded. So we think of, okay, let's collect a lot of data, understand this person's physiology and frankly, psychology, and to then help them kind of know, predict, help them see patterns, basically collect a lot of data and see blips and trends over time, so that hopefully we could say, oh, this person is headed for diabetes. This is what we can do about it. Or this person has hypertension. Mm-hmm. They don't know yet. Much like Larry Smarr and Mike Snyder self-diagnosed themselves, kind of understand, okay, this is where I'm headed. This is what I can do. Precision nutrition is about foods specifically to keep us healthy, but also address certain diseases. So if you have ESRD or if you have heart failure, you may want to be on a particular diet.
Age renal disease, you mean?
Age renal disease, or exactly. Or if you have IBS, maybe you're on a low FODMAP diet. So you want to have precise nutrition for your situation. If you are in disease, if you are healthy and you want to prevent disease. So yes, so the future looks to us, future is multi-omic, the future is personalized, in the future, people have a lot more data, and companies like January will help them make sense out of that data, synthesize the data, analyze the data, and then turn it into simple things like walk this much, eat that. Because why? Because generic advice doesn't work. Personalized advice works. People are infinitely interested in what works for them, not what works for everyone else.
Absolutely. It reminds me of Leroy Hood and the Institute for Systems Biology and his P4 medicine concept, which is preventive, predictive, personalized, and participatory, meaning you have to participate in your well-being. And it's really breaking down the old ideas of disease as we know them. And I think for me, what's really exciting, and I'd love to hear how you see AI playing a role and who's doing the work.
Do you want to know my secrets for living a long and happy and healthy life? Well, all I have to do is check out my weekly newsletter, Mark's Picks, where I share my favorite tips for health, longevity, well-being, and lots more. Check it out, and the link below.
So really what you're talking about is that the quantified self movement combined with the omics revolution and the superimposition of AI and machine learning and big data on top of it is just going to revolutionize everything about how we take care of people.
Absolutely. As we develop the omics better, like proteomics and others, as the wearables become more telling, these continuous modalities enable us to do machine learning. And when we do machine learning, we see patterns. And so I do think that, I think China has been very, very smart about measuring health and trying to understand what we do.
What are they doing?
And they're able to apply it to 1.3 billion people, and they can solve for health. I believe one of the greatest consequences of China being more advanced in AI than we are is solving for health.
Is that good or bad?
I mean, that's excellent. I'm very, very happy as a global citizen. I want everyone to be healthy. I think that's phenomenal. I just want us to also be running after health in the same way. They're doing the right thing. We need to do the right thing by our population as well.
And so what are they doing differently than we are?
Well, they have a lot of state-sponsored research. They approach a lot of the best scientists in the world. They can set up a lab for you in 48 hours, give you a dozen most intelligent fellows to work for you and to do research. They pick winners, as you know, when they know some a private sector. They have a very close public-private sector partnership. If they see a company succeeding, they quickly put their finger on the scale, and the company is propelled into the whole population. So as you know, they record everything. They have videos recording the whole population. So technically, you should be able to look at how often people are sleeping, getting up, when are they eating, how many times are they eating. They have I don't want to say reverse engineered our genome sequencing, but I think that is a belief. They are basically all the advances we're making in omic by omic. I think they are picking those up very quickly and taking a much faster path to it than we are. So they're definitely going to have continuous life monitoring. They will have omics. They will have wearables. They will know more about their population. I mean, just look at Mark. They built a hospital for 1,000 people in 10 days. Wow.
It's kind of crazy. Yeah, it's true.
And the tracing and the virus tracing. Yeah, I mean, they take, like I said, one of the consequences of AI supremacy of China over US will be solving for health. And we should hustle. We should run fast. We should solve. We should innovate.
I mean, my biggest, honestly, Sean, I've been struggling with this for decades, literally, because it's been clear to me that given the massive shift in the paradigm of medicine from a reductionist, disease-oriented approach to a systems network approach, aka functional medicine, that there's no way that this can scale unless we have the AI machine learning help and support, because the complexity of human biology is just staggering. I mean, there's 37 billion chemical reactions every second in your body.
5 billion years of evolution. Absolutely.
Yeah, how can anybody kind of think through that as a provider in a way that makes a huge difference for people? So I feel like we're in this moment where I'm sort of waiting around for somebody who's got the money, the resources, the science to actually start to do this. And it seems like you're heading on that track. It's not as grand as I would like to see it, which is essentially encompassing this really new paradigm and starting to collect data based on this new kind of network theories of medicine, because Watson is interesting, but that's the IBM computer that basically went to medical school and can digest all the literature, but it's all from the old paradigm. So it's like putting a rocket on a horse and buggy. It's
Absolutely.
like, well, we don't want a horse and buggy. We want a Tesla,
Right. And we need to understand exactly how two people with diabetes are different. For example, someone could have diabetes in their musculature, it's in their liver. We will be able to understand these differences with AI. I think I agree with you. We're in an inflection point. One, wearables are exploding, as I mentioned. We're in the golden age of machine learning. We can learn a lot from sparse data. COVID accelerated telemedicine. I think telemedicine is here to stay. That is not going away. It unmasked chronic disease. It showed how many people have underlying conditions, because people, started dying. 40% of people who died had diabetes or other chronic condition. The cost of healthcare is just not sustainable. So we're spending $3.8 trillion on healthcare today. It's supposed to go to almost $12 trillion by 2040. That's in 19 years. In 19 years, we're supposed to go to 11.8 trillion, according to this report that just came out. And only 10% of, only 2.9% of this is going to prevention. Only 2.9% of what we're spending is going to prevention. 10% of it is going to end-of-life care.
It's insane.
It's insane. Don't you think those need to be swapped?
That's insane.
2.9% for prevention, 10% for end-of-life care. I think food as medicine is gaining traction. Definitely. I think it's people like, Dari should be Minister of Nutrition in this country, or Secretary of Nutrition. Seriously.
I told him, but he doesn't want the job. I told him.
Oh my God. Seriously. Food as medicine. Food is medicine, is the medicine we take 3 to 5 times a day, and we need a lot more medically tailored foods, functional foods, both obviously natural, but also bred for added health. So I hope to see government taking a much, much stronger step. And also, I think we see a tipping point in consumerization of health, right? Just look at the testing companies, Everlywell. Look at retail clinics. You're going to get your healthcare at where you are at. You're not going to go to the doctor's office. You're going to go to Walmart. You're going to go to Target, to CVS. You're going to go to Forward and Parsley and One Medical. And you're going to
come to you.
Corporate clinics. Yes, or they'll come to you, or you'll go to the doctor at your work. I think people will get care where they want it.
So great. So let's talk more about January AI and what distinguishes it from other CGM glucose monitoring companies. And you have an interesting platform called the Season of Me, which is essentially a personalized approach to understanding your body and blood sugar. So tell us, what is the technology you're using? How's it different? And what is the sort of the framework of how you work with people to drive behavior change? Because that's the hardest part, right? We all know what to do, but most of us don't do it. So tell us about those two pieces.
I would say the most defining difference between us and everyone else in this sector is our ability to predict. It's our AI. That's the biggest differentiator. The fact that we can produce glycemic predictions for people. Like I said, you want to know if you can drink 3 glasses of Chardonnay, or you want to drink 3 glasses of Chardonnay? All right, ask the AI. What happens to my blood sugar if I have 3 glasses of Chardonnay? Don't drink 3 glasses of Chardonnay to find out how it impacts your body. Don't use your body as the place of experiment. You do it in silico. Don't do it in vivo. Do it in silico. So let the machine tell you. Why put it through your body? You want to eat this thing. You're sitting at your pizzeria and you want to have this pizza. You want to see how it's going to impact you. Look at it ahead of time. Don't look at your glycemic response after it has already happened. Look at it before it can happen. Use the machines, not your body, to run experiments. Make smart choices. So that's the single most important differentiator between us and everyone else. Our ability to predict. Our AI is our superpower. And in terms of how, like I mentioned, the Season of Me program is a curated program that we also have other products in the works that are going to come out. But Season of Me is a curated program that over 30 days teaches people how to increase their fasting period, how to be cognizant of how much fiber they have in their body to increase fiber, how to manage their calories, how to dial their activity to keep their blood sugar in a healthy range, to become aware of lower glycemic index foods. So, while maintaining. So these are levers. We offer them. Some people take up some of those. Some people take up all of those. Some people pick up fasting and nothing else. Some people do all of those. They lose weight. They manage their blood sugar. Their time in range improves. As you recall, A1C has been, the kind of golden measure of blood sugar for a while, but that's an average number over 90 days. It's not so actionable. You don't wake up and say, I want to improve my A1C this morning. But time in range, you can manage that. You're like, okay, how am I doing? And that's what January helps you do.
And what are you seeing? What are you seeing from the clients that you're using the product, and how are their outcomes different, and what are the changes they're seeing, and how successful have they been at changing their behavior?
They're reporting everything from a lower A1C, lower weight, more energy, fasting. If you don't eat so close to your bedtime, you're able to have better sleep, more restfulness. Somebody told us that their focus improved so much. They actually sent us a video and they said, feel free to share this with other people, completely unprompted. They said, I'm keeping my job because of January, because I lacked focus so much. So we're getting we're getting very positive feedback from them. I think we still want to dial our user experience a lot more. We're a science-first company. We focused on science first and our research first. And we worried about, our developing the app and the app user experience and all of that second. We're trying to make sure that we also create a magical user experience for people. And we're working on that now. But very, very positive feedback.
That's so exciting. And I think, and how does it work? Like, how do people get connected to January AI, and how do they?
Yeah, sure. So they go to our website. Sure. They go to our website. They go through a brief questionnaire to go through telemedicine. They are given if they qualify, they are given a prescription for CGMs, and they pay and they conclude their transaction on the website. Then they download the app. We ship them what they need for the program, and then they download the app. They hook up their heart rate monitor, whether it's Apple Watch or Fitbit. They hook up their CGM, then they start logging their food, and within 4 days, voila, they start getting predictions of their glycemic response. We tell them they're spiking foods, what foods are spiking them, what foods are like those foods they could have that wouldn't spike them. Yeah. We give them what we call activity counterfactuals, like you ate fish and chips. Had you walked 10 minutes, this would have been your response. Had you walked 20 minutes, this would have been your response. So we give them food counterfactuals. You ate fried chicken. Had you had salmon, this would have been your response. We tell them this is your fasting period. We start increasing their fasting period. We give them education through content about, what is insulin resistance? What is intermittent fasting? Why is it effective? How does it work on your body? So it's a combination of education, small nudges, and specific behavioral levers such as fasting, calorie management, eating lower GL foods, increasing activity, to try to get them to a better metabolic state.
And is it something that they're able to adhere to, that people find sticky and are willing to sort of do the work around it?
Yes, people come to January. We've tried to simplify certain things over time. They absolutely don't want that. They're like, no, I want to know how much. We're like, do you want to just give us a picture and a few words? They're like, no, I want to know exactly what macros are in my food. I want to know exactly how much fiber is in my food. We're coming to you for precision. Don't remove the precision. So it's an interesting balance. With precision comes some friction. So a lot of people are willing to do that because they are optimizers. They really want to optimize.
Yeah, and I think we're all going to have to sort of take control of our own health and realize that health doesn't happen in the hospital or the doctor's office; it happens at home, and that all of us being able to be more empowered with these tools, technologies, the sort of decentralized access to our health data, and the superimposition of AI and machine learning to help people make sense of it and act on it is just huge. It's a game changer in healthcare. And I'm just like thrilled that you're doing this work, and I'm thrilled that you're putting the science behind it, because a lot of times it's easy to do something fun and goofy, but the science part is hard. The 16 million foods you tracked and analyze, the ways in which you're integrating all these different data sets, the way you're looking at other analytes and things to do. So to me, it seems like January AI is not just a blood sugar monitoring company. It's really more looking at how do we use quantified self metrics and AI to solve our big health crises.
Absolutely. I felt like I had the capacity, the mental space, and kind of the opportunity to look at some really hard problems. And, when you have that opportunity, you must take it. So I feel very privileged to actually be working on these and the sort of frontiers of health today, combining medicine and machine learning and science, because what we do in a lab takes 15 years to get to the doctor's office. So how do we combine? How do we close the gap? How do we help people become really aware of their state? Those who want to know. Some people don't want to know. That's okay. Not everyone needs to know. But the ones who want to know, how can we empower them, equip them to know? And then how can we help them synthesize the data, because it's not human interpretable?
It's right. I think that's a key message for people to understand, that when we go to the doctor, we think, the doctor knows everything, measures everything, tests everything. So I went to the doctor, they did my checkup, they did my labs, everything's fine. I don't know what's wrong. I'm like, well, that's just like skimming the surface of what's really going on. And I mean, that's what excites me so much about medicine today is that we're in this really revolutionary paradigm of one, the science shifting around what disease is and how health happens and the science of health. And two, the technologies allow us to, like yours, like January AI, to start to kind of dive deep into our own biology and create personalized approaches to creating health for ourselves. So it's super
Absolutely.
exciting.
So our dream is to mathematically model all the human functions if we can, figure out what's happening, gastric emptying, figure out sort of how is food moving through your body. You know, that we have a lot of dreams still. We have a 10-year roadmap ahead of us that with very interesting research.
You know, I just interviewed a guy for the podcast, Fred Provenza, who's talking about this work that's being started up, looking at metabolomic analysis of people eating different foods, not just in vitro, but actually like in their bodies.
Absolutely.
And so what happens when you feed someone a grass-fed steak or a feedlot steak? Is it different? What happens when you eat this or that? It's very fascinating. And we've really not done that even work, which you'd think we would have done by now, but it's really, and then the question, how does it affect different people? And all that's going to come into focus with the work that you're doing with AI and understanding how to really disrupt healthcare. So I'm super excited. Any way I can help you guys, I think it's just a tremendous moment in healthcare. And for those listening, you know, a lot of this is still abstract for people, but the truth is, with these new metrics, we're able to learn a lot about our bodies. I had the Aura Ring for a while I was wearing, and it was fascinating. When I drank some wine or had some alcohol, I noticed my sleep was screwed up, and even if I wasn't aware of it, or my heart rate variability changed, or I noticed that when I sort of stopped traveling and being on airplanes 3 or 4 times a week, my heart rate variability improved. So my stress response, even though I didn't feel stressed in my head, my body was registering the experience as stress. And 100%. It was such an incredible piece of feedback. So I think we really have just sort of begun to scratch the surface of what we're going to be doing in medicine. And it's not, unfortunately, it doesn't really come from the center. I work in healthcare institutions and they do their best, and there are a lot of progressive people and really open minds. But it's often challenging with the inertia of the system in terms of reimbursement, what gets paid for, what people are doing. I mean, we know that food is the best treatment for diabetes, and yet it's not paid for. So doctors do amputations, they do heart surgery, they do lots of medications. It's like $1 bazillion. Diabetes is the most expensive condition in healthcare today, and costing America the most money. It's 1 in 3 of Medicare dollars, and probably 2 out of 3 if you count prediabetes and all its complications. And yet we don't even treat them with the right treatment that we know works. And we were talking about it just a whole next level. So
and CGMs are covered today by insurance companies only for insulin intense use population. That's 3.5 million people out of 122 million people who are believed to have diabetes or prediabetes. But the beauty of AI, again, with AI, you don't have to wear a CGM 365 days out of the year. Payers, employers, put CGMs, use January for your populations with intermittent use. Use it 4 times a year. Use it 2 times a year. We build the models. From there on, we predict. They don't need to wear it in order to get the benefit. They just need to wear it a few times because their bodies change, they age, they travel, they get pregnant, etc. But again, AI democratizes medicine because we can predict. Our ability to predict reduces the need for these devices and makes them available and accessible by a much larger population.
Well, thank you so much for the work you're doing and the advance you're creating in healthcare and medicine and the thinking behind this, because it's not easy what you've taken on. And for those listening, I think, this whole conversation about AI and medicine and science, it's a lot to take in. But I think the bottom line is that, the body is extraordinarily complex. We've just been scratching the surface, and with new tools and technologies of assessment of our biology, both in traditional healthcare and also within the disruptive models like January AI, we're going to be having insights that we never had before. We're going to provide tools for people that they've never had before to optimize and enhance their health and reverse disease.
Hey YouTube, if you like this video, you're going to love the next one. Click on it to check it out today.
Dietary guidelines were meant to prevent disease.
We got pretty bad.
How has that progress gone?
Oh.
Here's
that working for you?
Obesity going up, diabetes going up, heart disease still #1 killer, cancer going up. So by any outcome measure, they have been a total failure.